I wasn't expecting this, but
No, I wasn't.
Raul was, when I first met him, was in Washington, D.C., and was kind of the stalwart person that if I had a problem or had an issue, needed to get something done, needed information, I just called Raul. So when I saw the list and the notice that he was coming to Nevada, to say the least, I was very pleased, very excited. And one of his first things he did when he got here is stepped up to the plate and with Amy Luders, who's been fantastic as well. There's a new day has dawned in the state of Nevada with the relationship between the BLM and NDOW. We've been working together on the sage grouse stuff. Stood up nationally, has taken a lead role here. So I'm really happy he's able to come here today and really know what the BLM is doing in cooperation with the department and the other 11 western states. So in keeping with your directive, you have sage grouse on the agenda. We're really lucky to have Raul over here.
Okay, thank you. Go ahead.
Wow, that introduction, gosh, I'll have to keep it up all the way. Anyway, so everything hear me fine? Okay, good. As Ken said, this whole sage grouse effort that we are about to ready and have already started to embark on is really a monumental effort by BLM that of the likes that we have not seen before in our agency. Because we are amending land use plans in much of the western United States to address the sage grouse efforts here. And we have a very short time frame as a result of a lawsuit to Fish and Wildlife Service over their candidate species program, of which the greater sage grouse was part of that effort. So we have a lot to do between now and September of 2014. That's our deadline. This is a landscape level species. It affects about every state that BLM manages except for Alaska, Arizona, and New Mexico. So we have about 10, 11 western states that we will be amending land use plans. And what we have to do, what Fish and Wildlife Service has clearly told us, is that all the things that we're doing on the ground for habitat management, those are all great things. And we need to continue to do those great things. The one area, however, that they said that we as an agency were deficient on is what we call regulatory mechanisms. Their concern is that the Bureau, as we approach our variety of policies that we have to manage our landscapes, have been inconsistent across the West on how we approach that, and that they need to have certainty that those measures that we will be applying to help conserve and enhance sage grouse habitat across the West are a little bit more formalized, and we're doing that formalization in our land use planning documents. So what's going on is the Bureau has created a governance structure specifically to task to address sage grouse issues and the habitats and the land use plans. And we have various levels of this structure. We have a national policy team, of which Ken is the representative from the state fish and game agencies in the West. We have 2 state BLM directors, Amy Luders, my boss, and Don Simpson out of Wyoming. We have U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service representation. We have NFCS representation, and we're in the process of getting Forest Service representation, not to mention our Washington office, various Washington office program leads back in Washington, D.C. That overall team is designed to make sure that BLM is consistent on how we're applying a regulatory mechanism across the West. So they're kind of like the board of directors, if I can say that, to make sure that as we move forward, we're addressing conservation measures needed to keep the bird off of the list. That's the goal, is to keep the sage grouse off of the threatened endangered species list. And we are in the process of developing conservation measures, recommended conservation measures, to begin the process by which we go out to the public and ask for input on those conservation measures that we believe, and when I say we, it's land management agencies, it's the researchers, it's Fish and Wildlife Service agency personnel, and fish and game personnel, that these conservation measures are going to be adequate enough to keep the bird off the list across the West. So a critical component of our effort are what we're calling these conservation measures, and another critical component of this effort is developing priority sage grouse habitat across the West. Wyoming has already done that as a model. About 3 years old, I believe their model is. That was done through a direction through their governor at that time and reaffirmed by the current governor, and by which they went out and developed and identified where in Wyoming do they need to protect sage grouse, and they're calling it core areas in sage grouse, and where they allow other uses to occur And in order to keep the bird off the list, the governor's direction to his various stakeholders was we need to come up with a plan to keep the bird off the list. And Wyoming came up with that model. The rest of the western United States is kind of in that early process. So we're identifying some initial priority, what we call core habitats or priority habitats for sage grouse. That'll be further vetted through BLM's planning process, so that by 2014, we clearly know across the West what is definitely going to be considered priority sage grouse habitat, and those conservation measures I mentioned earlier will apply to how we manage those priority habitats. So a lot of the efforts that we're going to be talking about are conserving, enhancing existing habitats, if you want to say reclaiming habitat that was once sage grouse habitat, currently is not sage grouse habitat. And we have broken up the West into two regions, eastern region and western region. And why we did that is because the threats to the bird are different in those two regions. As most of you probably know, in the eastern region, we have a lot of oil and gas development. That was the major threat out there. In the western region, we have a lot of fires and invasive species that come along with fires. So we're losing our habitat that way. But all of our conservation measures that the Bureau is looking into implementing right now will affect all of our programs that we manage on public lands. So from recreation to livestock raising to mineral development to right-of-ways to fire management, fire suppression, our habitat enhancement program. It's all geared towards focusing our efforts and our limited funds to the best areas to make a bang for the buck. Critical to all of this is our partnerships with our state fish and game agencies and Fish and Wildlife Service. They have to be part of this picture all the way through so that at the end, everybody's on board with what we need to do. And in particular, Fish and Wildlife Service has to be able to know what it is that we're planning, because once 2014 comes, they have 1 year to make their determination whether or not to list the bird as a threatened or endangered species. So it's critical from day one that they're involved, and they have been involved. So that when they reach that point, they know exactly what we're doing, what we need, and that'll help them come up with their determination process. So there's a saying that it takes a village. In the case of sage grouse management, it's going to take a small city. If there's a lot of moving pieces, there is a lot of stuff that's going on. The train has left the station. We're playing catch up to that train. And there's a lot of people that are starting to get involved, that are jumping on the train with their ideas, and that's great. We need to get their ideas, but we also have a clock that's ticking, and that's what we have to meet. So that's why it's moving out fast. So I'm optimistic that by the time we get to 2014, we are going to have a clear set of maps that are going to protect the bird across the West. We're going to have a clear set of conservation measures that are going to be applied to those priority areas that will help keep the bird off the list. And the Fish and Wildlife Service is going to rule favorably for all of us that the bird will be off the list. So we still maintain those multiple uses on the landscape. No doubt they will be different. Our director has clearly told us that this effort is going to change how we've done multiple use on public lands like we haven't seen in the past. But our goal is still to preserve as much of that multiple use that we can, while at the same time protecting the bird. So that's it in a nutshell. And open to any questions you may have.
Commissioner, go ahead.
Thank you, Chairman. Just, I guess the biggest question for me, being kind of the policy arm of the department, how can this commission help in this effort?
Well, definitely being actively involved, and obviously you guys reach out to a lot of stakeholders and where you're from and in your communities. Letting them know about this effort is critical. Letting them know, basically this fall, we're going to go and have scoping meetings across the West with the sage grouse effort. So letting them know to be prepared to attend those so they can get a briefing of what's going on. They can see the schedule that's going to come out so they can see how they're going to plug into the process and where they're going to have their opportunities to provide their comments. So to me, that's a huge part right there. And like I said, this fall, we're anticipating November. Probably when some of the first public meetings are going to be held.
Commissioner,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. In reference to fire, and well, I've mentioned a couple times at waffle meetings. In reference to fire and sage, I'd throw out a theory for you on this. One thing, as one of my other things I do is volunteer firefighter. I've done a lot of it really in association with BLM out in central Nevada where I'm at. BLM does a lot of the fire suppression, but we also got the volunteers. And the one thing that I have tried to advocate a lot is that there never seems to be any general map. We never know where critical places are that we should be suppressing for, whether it's mule deer or sage grouse or any of these species. That's one thing when we go out with BLM, because we're always going out all together, Forest Service, BLM, and volunteers, is we should have maps to let, and it should come to the BLM, because the locals, we're not going to be able to present, saying, this is where you should really focus for. The last couple of years, it hasn't been that important. We haven't had that many fires out in our areas. But the fires of 99 and 2000, it would really come in handy when those big fire years come, when you have really limited resources, to have maps saying, this is where you should focus. And the other places, they're secondary. And that's one thing I think, really, if the BLM had a chance to work on suppression, it would be to focus those efforts. It really is limited when those big fires happen. We've been lucky for a while. There's probably a window. This year we're done with fires, large fires, because the temperatures went. But that would be one thing. Hopefully, agreement on that. I would really like to see is maps, not only for BLM, but for the other agencies as well. What do you think on that subject?
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up, because actually the Bureau for the past 3 years has actually had maps that we have given to our firefighting organization that clearly outlines the priority sage grouse areas. So the point you're bringing up to me and the message I need to take home is that obviously that message isn't gotten to the volunteer fire departments that we work very closely with, particularly in rural areas, to manage our fires. So if you're not hearing that, that's a good thing for me to know, because in our direction, we need to make sure that not only us and BLM folks are definitely got Forest Service have that map that we've been using for the past few years, that they make sure they share that information with the rural fire districts, which I believe, I thought was happening, but obviously not uniform.
Yeah, and it's not only where I'm at, and I've involved with several other fire departments and we go to lots of meetings, there just doesn't seem to be a lot of it. I know for a period of years we had an individual who was out there that was doing a very good job in setting up many areas that were basically don't control zones. And that fell away. Stop controlling these areas. We had maps made up through the BLM, and that was just as important as where to focus. Where not to focus is just as important where to focus, and those fell away associated with BLM. And it's very important dealing with the wildlife aspect, but it's not just my map happens to be out in the Eureka area. There is none. I mean, it's zero. It's not, well, yeah, we've got those maps and we don't pay attention to them. We never heard of them. We don't know what you're talking about. It's that level.
So at least you know we do have them now.
Yeah.
So now you can add, if someone says we never heard of them, say you should have heard of them.
Okay, I've heard of them.
I will make sure that we continue to get that message out all the way through the fire organization, which in Nevada, since I've been here for a few months, I thought was very proactive in managing for sage grouse habitat in the fire organization. So obviously we've got work to do.
The last couple of years, like I say, there's been no major issues, especially out in our general district. Little stuff. But a lot of times the volunteers are the first people there. The BLM come and they, bring up and mop up and do the stuff. But that's always been general role. I don't know if you're familiar with that. But initial suppression, the volunteers go out, get there faster, know the roads, they know how they access. They get there, they're on it for a while. They can get the fires out first, and then BLM comes in, cleans up, and everybody else goes home, and they take over, and big stuff they take over. So that's okay. Thank you.
Could you walk me through the process of how this is going to occur and at what level? In other words, am I hearing that it's going to be modifications of the resource management plans for each of the districts? Like, for instance, the Ely district within the last year or two just finished a resource management plan, for that district. Are you talking about amending those and going through that process again, which is a pretty long process, the EIS, basically getting through the whole public process again? And how does that relate to specific projects that may be already in process, or is this going to only be affecting projects that come up after the amendments to the resource management plan?
So a couple things there. Let's get back to your planning issue first, the kind of the long term. We recognize across the West we have different land use plans and different process. Something like Ely that was recently completed, to a place like Elko, which has a very old plan completed in the late 70s, early 80s, and planning somewhere in between there. By 2014, September 2014, all those plans, regardless of where they're at, will be amended at that point. plans are just starting, like, or getting ready to finish, like, for instance, Winnemucca, they would fully recognize that they'll put the best sage grouse information we have today into their plan, and they recognize by 2014 their plan no doubt will be amended to bring in the current stuff that we're working on right now. Plans like Carson City and Battle Mountain that are just getting going, we'll be working with those plans and put the information in it as it goes along, and when that 2014 it comes across, if their plan is ready and can be signed off with the new information, great. If it's not ready, it'll be amended by our larger members. So that's kind of the smorgasbord of plans that we're working on. So 2014 is critical in that all of our plans will be amended across the West.
Okay, now obviously at some point in time, you're going to be determining what are the critical things that need to be in these plans. And so I'm wondering is there going to be a time before the resource management plans are done that individual projects in these areas are in process now that would basically be scrutinized under that same criteria, even though it isn't in a resource management plan?
Right. So the part you're bringing up is what we're calling our national interim policy that we're getting ready to issue, which is going to guide us between now and 2014 and how we're going to do projects and public lands. And in that interim policy, the general concept is if you're in priority sage grouse habitat, whatever that's identified to be today, then you have to follow these certain rules within priority sage grouse habitat. If you're outside of it, then there's the other rules that apply to it. With the goal, we're trying to preserve all of our options at this point until we get to 2014, which is when at that point the public's had a chance to weigh in, we've had a chance to kind of vet all the different measures that we want to look at and refine those priority habitat maps, and then we say this is the important stuff. So we do have interim policies that will be implemented that will address ongoing projects as well as projects that will have to be between now and 2014.
And what is the effective date of the interim policy? Is it in place now?
In October.
October of this year.
And one thing Fish and Wildlife Service has clearly told us, consistency, consistency, consistency. They need to make sure that we as an agency are applying things consistent, whether you're in Nevada or in Idaho, because a bird that crosses the state line doesn't know where it's at.
Talk about that with carriage. Commissioner Raul.
And across lines, there's many lines that are critical habitat for the Forest Service and BLM overlap. That's saying, not overlap, but they abut each other. Do you have counterparts that you're working directly on this with the Forest Service and you're going to
We are definitely engaging the Forest Service. So just to put it in a context, BLM manages approximately 50%, a little more than 50% of the sage grouse habitat across the West. So we're definitely the big dog in this. Private land makes up about 30+%. NRCS has been very engaged, has put a lot of money and effort working with private landowners. Some of those private landowners are the same private landowners we'll be working on with BLM. So we're really the two big dogs when it comes to managing sage grouse and their habitat. Forest Service is about 8% of the landscape, and then the remaining is like states and Fish and Wildlife Service. So definitely we have to coordinate with everybody. If we have range permittees on BLM side, there's no doubt they are using public Forest Service ground in a lot of cases. So whatever we're implementing, it has to be consistent. So definitely going to engage with Jeannie Higgins here with the local HT. She's on board with what we're doing and can get involved, not only in the greater sage grouse, but also in the bi-stage effort. That is another separate effort. So yeah, and that's why we want them involved even at the national level. Even though the Forest Service said this hasn't been our issue, it's only 8%, they recognize that they need to get on the train.
One other question for me. Anybody else have a question?
Continuing juniper suppression, what is the BLM thinking then to deal with the continuing juniper encroachment problem?
I mean, obviously a very big issue. And again, once we have our priority habitat maps identified, then we're going to tackle it, prioritize it. And a PJ was once a PJ area that was once good sage grouse habitat, and it's currently not. We'll be looking at addressing that.
In particular, I mean, you guys using fire? Are you talking about? What are you talking?
I think we want to keep all of our tools in the toolbox.
Because I know the one thing that just back on the fire issue associated with that is I know that, and I'd say one of the most progressive things I heard was from an individual named was actually Troy Phelps, who's out working out there for the BLM. I know we're still with BLM somewhere in Nevada. But you know, it was an area, it was a map of do not control fires in these areas because they are on the list that might be needed prescribed burning at some point. And I know that we, the state, and the BLM have spent inordinate amounts. I mean, we've been out there in areas where I know that we're on his planned maps, and there's air tankers bringing in loads of stuff, and it's on the map. Like, maybe burn this mountain. And here we are out there, and there's 50 guys out there working on fire, and air tankers coming in. You know, wow. And even BLM guys are saying, yeah, they told us to come, we're coming. We're jumping guys on the fire, even though it's on the map, it should be burned, but because the plan is not implemented yet. You know, they don't, still the order is still there, suppress everything. So I've given a picture for you. I mean, you know, when is that going to get implemented? Can you straighten that problem out for me, please, sir? You got that under control?
We will be working on that.
Okay.
Okay, I remember.
He's good.
Does this apply just to sage grouse?
This planet, yes, I understand that, yeah.
Okay, because I was reading the paper, I know the Center for Biological Diversity sued U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service because they weren't moving quick enough on a lot of number of other species, and so this amendment to the management plan doesn't involve these other species that.
The effort that we're looking at right now doesn't.
Just
of course,
sage
yeah.
grouse. Okay.
You know, they have a lot of species on their list they're looking at. The bi-state, you know, just real quickly, the bi-state population is on a different track. It's on a faster track. We've been starting meetings with NDOW and Fish and Wildlife Service, both California and Nevada, just trying to wrap our hands around it right now. What does this animal look like, and how do we need to move forward? A lot of optimism there that we can get to a non-listing position with that one too. So that's what I said. It's going to take a small city. There are so many moving parts to sage grouse on so many state levels that it's there's a lot of effort involved in this.
Chairman, I don't necessarily have a question, but kind of a comment based on that. There are a number of sagebrush obligate species, mammals, birds, that benefit from this plan. Right? It's just not specifically designed. And some of those are, you know, being pushed. You know, the pygmy rabbits, the sage sparrows, the brewer sparrows. You know, they're all species that are being pushed. Shrikes, I think, are now there. But the bottom line is that there's a lot of species that'll help that are pretty high on radars. So it's bigger than, you know, it's definitely a landscape issue. There's no doubt.
Okay, go ahead, push it through.
Just a quick comment, Raul. I wanted to thank you and the BLM for being proactive on this and engaging the state agencies, because I think it's one of the bigger issues facing the state of Nevada as a whole. And I'm going to be pushing, and we'll probably discuss this tomorrow during the agenda, to get this commission involved as well as the CABs and the local sportsmen, because I think to really make this work, we're going to have to keep in mind and take into account a lot of public input from the local folks who know the resources the best. So I appreciate you spearheading the effort, and I look forward to it being as collaborative as we can make it in your time frames.
And we appreciate that too.
Okay, thank you very much, appreciate it. Okay, now we have a couple of sage grouse handouts here. Are these just informational for us, or are we going to be talking about these?
Which ones, what are they?
Now, actually, still going, yes, they have sage grouse.
Yeah, that's just a copy of the PowerPoints that Sean Espinosa gave in the last meeting.
Got it, okay.
We promised to get those to you.
Okay, then, we are moving on to item